guys, it's Sarah, and today I'm going to be doing both my January and February wrap-up. If you're wondering why my makeup looks a little crazy, it's because I just posted a video of me creating this look based on a book cover, so I'll link that down below if you want to check that out. But I think this makeup looks kind of fun. I kind of want to incorporate like heart, confetti, and glitter into my regular makeup looks like every day. I addressed this in that other video, but I'm not really in my normal filming spot because I'm house sitting for a friend. I really tried to make it cute with like these Christmas lights, but I don't know if I succeeded, but it's fine. I have a friend. Come on. Oh, you knocked the pillow off. What you doing? What you doing? You wanna sit down? What are you doing? Oh my god. Alright, we'll just do the wrap up like this. It's fine. Let me just start by saying that I read 15 books in January and February, and I know that some booktubers can read like 15 books in 1 month, but for me to read that many in the first 2 months of the year is a big accomplishment. That's a hell of a lot of books. I will admit that I think 12 of them were audiobooks and then 3 of them were physical books, which is already another accomplishment for me. Joey, we're filming right now. Sit. Okay. Be my friend. Stay. That's really rude. Do you think I'm boring? But anyway, I'm really excited to share what I read with you guys. I liked most of these books. I don't know, I just feel like I'm having a really good reading year so far. And I've already finished 2 more books since we've gone into March, so I'll talk about that at the end of March. Why are you giving them that look? The first book that I read in January was One of Us is Lying by Kerri and McManus. To say this book is bad would be not entirely true, but to say it is good would also not be true. I will say that this was a compelling read for me. It definitely kept me interested from start to finish. My biggest issue with it was that it was kind of problematic. So basically it's about these 4 teenagers who get detention at the very beginning of the book, and while they're in detention, one of the other students ends up dying, and so basically the police come to the conclusion that he was murdered. And so among these 4 students, they have a bunch of secrets, and the guy who ended up dying actually had like a gossip column where he would like reveal secrets about everybody, sort of like a Gossip Girl sort of situation. And so he had a lot of enemies, and like I said, it definitely kept me interested from start to finish, but there was just certain elements that I feel like weren't great. There was like villainizing mental health, there was a little bit of slut shaming, there was a character that got outed. So I ended up giving this book 2 stars. If I was just basing this on my enjoyment, like as a book, I would give it like 3 stars. But because of some of those like icky issues that I don't particularly like in books, I had to dock a star. So we ended up with 2 stars. The next book I finished was Hunting Prince Dracula by Kerri Maniscalco. This is the second book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. It centers around this girl named Audrey Rose who is studying to be a coroner of sorts. Like she like apprentices with her uncle, and she knows a lot about like science and like dead bodies and stuff. And so in this sequel, she goes to Transylvania to go to a special program for learning like science and stuff. I'm not being very eloquent describing this. She's the smart one, not me. In this one, like the title suggests, there's this idea that like Prince Dracula has come back, and she is such a science-minded person that she doesn't really believe that there's vampires, but like she needs to get to the bottom of this, and people in the school that she's at keep getting murdered, and that's basically where the mystery lies. If any of you follow my wrap-ups closely, you'll know that I read Stalking Jack the Ripper, I think in either November or December, and I did not enjoy it at all. I gave it like 2 stars, but I can happily say that I gave this sequel, I think, 4 stars? I think that's what I gave it. I'd have to check Goodreads. I just feel like in the first book she made a lot of dumb decisions, and the resolution of the mystery was kind of silly. I feel like the second book did a lot better. I also feel like there was a lot more characters this time around. I feel like in the first book there was only really like 4 main characters, and that kind of like made it really obvious like who the killer was and stuff. And so for the second book, I just feel like there was more characters added, there was more women, there was just a lot more there, and I just feel like Audrey really like questioned the patriarchy and like didn't let people disrespect her, and I was here for it. So if you're unsure about reading this series, or if you didn't like the first book, I'd recommend keeping with it, because now I'm actually excited to read the 3rd one, which I think comes out later this year, and yeah, I think it'll be a good time. So the next 7 books I read, it's kind of weird to put 7 books together, but it makes the most sense because it was a series. It was the Mediator series by Meg Cabot. This was one of my all-time favorite series when I was in high school, so I really, really wanted to reread it. So books 1 through 6 center around this girl named Suze, who is a mediator, meaning that she can see ghosts and talk to them and touch them, unlike other like regular humans who can't do those things. So she moves from New York to California with her mother because her mother got remarried, and they're living in this old house, and her room is haunted by this ghost named Jessie. And so her and Jessie form like an unlikely friendship, and basically each book centers around a different sort of drama with like an overarching plot line. I love these books. I love them so much. I don't know if someone would really like them now because the writing is not like amazing by any means, but obviously these books were really important to me when I was a teenager, and so I still really like them, and I thought they were really fun, and I listened to them on audiobook this time around, except for, where is it? I had to read I don't even know what number this is. I feel like this is the 4th or 5th book. I had to read this one physically because for some reason, whoever made the audiobooks only made this one like abridged. Like I didn't even think that people wanted to listen to abridged audiobooks, and it's so weird because this is like only like 200 and something pages, and it's the shortest book in the series, so I just think it's really weird that they would abridge it. So obviously I was really salty about it. And then moving on to the 7th book. The 7th book is actually like a fast forward into the future, and I actually hadn't read this one as a teenager because this came out in 2012, and it was an edition that Meg Cabot obviously made much later, and I really, really enjoyed this edition. I liked seeing the characters as adults. I felt like they retained their personalities, but also seemed older, and it was just really fun, and I liked it a lot. And I feel like the mystery in this one and the ghosts in this one were a lot more complex, so hopefully that makes sense. I really like this series. I don't know if you'd like it. It's kind of, I don't even know what I would compare it to, but it's fun. It's kind of like chick lit, so if you're into that, maybe read it. So the next 2 books that I read were Down Among the Sticks and Bones and Beneath the Sugar Sky by Seanan McGuire. These are the 2nd and 3rd books in the Wayward Children's companion novel series. Basically this series centers around these children who have all at one point lived in a fantasy world that they were led to by a magical door, sort of like a Narnia situation, and these kids have been thrust back into the real world, and they don't really know how to cope, and so they have to go to a special school. And so in the first book they're at the school, and it's kind of almost like a murder mystery because someone gets murdered and they don't know who, and all these kids are trying to deal with the fact that they're not in the fantasy world that they love anymore. And so the 2nd book actually is almost more of like a prequel because it centers around these 2 characters, Jack and Jill from the 1st book, who are from this really dark land that's sort of like Frankenstein-esque or Dracula-esque. It's like kind of like a dark world, and so it kind of tells their story of how they ended up there and then how they ended up at the school. And then the 3rd book actually is back with the same characters from the 1st book, where they go and they involve one of my actual like favorite characters from the 1st book. I'm not making any sense right now. But the moral of what I'm trying to say is that these books are amazing. They're so magical. I know I did a terrible job of describing them. Ugh, just makes me so nostalgic in a weird way because it kind of reminds me of like reading Harry Potter or just reading any sort of fantasy when I was a kid. And you know when you're a kid and you just wish that your Hogwarts letter would come? I feel like these books like make me feel those things. It was just good. They're a good read. I'm really excited because I thought that the series was ending with these 3 books, but there was just announced that there's gonna be a 4th book, so I hope she writes 100 of them because I would read them all. And they're all pretty short, so they're just a good time. And I listened to all of them on audio, and the narrator changes every single time with each book, but each narrator is really good. And Seanan McGuire actually reads the 2nd one, so that's fun. It's always fun when the author reads their own book aloud. I feel like I'm rambling so much, but to be fair, it's like 2 a.m. right now, so if I'm not making any sense, that's why. And the next book that I read was I Believe in a Thing Called Love by Maurene. Every time I think of this book title, I just want to go, I believe in a thing called love. I know I'm really good at singing. This book centers around this girl named Desi, and she is Korean American. She has very bad luck with boys. Like every time she attempts to flirt, she fails, and she has never had a boyfriend, and she's in her senior year. She's very, very type A. She's really good at studying. She's like student body president. She is in like a million extracurriculars, and her dream is to go to, I think, Stanford, because it takes place in California. A new boy comes to town and Desi is just absolutely head over heels for him. She thinks he's so attractive and she really wants to get to know him. And so her father actually really loves K-dramas, and she's never been into them. But one day she sits down with him to watch one, and she realizes that K-dramas have a formula on how people fall in love. And because she's such a type A, sort of mathematical, analytical thinker, she decides to apply the rules of K-dramas to her life to make a boy fall in love with her. And that's basically the premise. I loved K-dramas when I was in high school. Like, I feel like, I don't want to sound lame, but I watched them before people really knew what they were. And I just thought they were so fun and so sweet. I feel like someone who's never seen a K-drama might not get everything in this book, but I got everything she was saying and every point she made about K-dramas. Like, I have like seen like 30 of them, so like I knew exactly what she was talking about. And I just thought this book was so cute and so fun and funny as well. And I really liked Desi as a character. And I would have given this book probably about 3 stars, but I absolutely loved Desi's dad, who she referred to as Appa, which is dad, I think, in Korean. And he was just so precious and just wanted the world for Desi, and like one of the best book dads in the whole world. So I gave this book 4 stars, and it's just like a really cute contemporary. I'm not normally a contemporary reader, but I feel like the K-drama element and some of the humor really pulled me in, so it was a good time. And the next book I read was After the Woods by Kim Savage. This is a YA thriller that centers around this girl who, in the beginning, her and her friend are going for a run in the woods, and this man pops up and he attempts to abduct her best friend, and so she ends up saving her friend and then taking her place, and so she ends up being in the woods for 2 days with this man, and she is eventually able to escape. And then the book takes place about a year later, and she's just trying to like piece together what happened to her and why it happened to her, because she knows that most abductions of children happen from people you know, and she doesn't know why this guy targeted her and her friend, but her friend is really apprehensive of talking about it and trying to figure out what happened. I gave this book 3 stars because the resolution of the mystery was kind of but I did really enjoy my reading experience from start to finish. It was very compelling, and I was very impressed with it because I don't typically like YA thrillers. I feel like they can be poorly written, but this one, I really enjoyed the writing, and I really enjoyed the main character and like her humor in like coping with her PTSD and stuff. And I don't know, I just thought it was really interesting. Like I said, the resolution of the mystery was like probably about like 3/4 of the way through the book it kind of like fell apart a little bit. Also, there's a random romance in here that is absolutely useless. Like, if you took the boy character out, it wouldn't change anything about the story. I feel like I've reached a point in my life where I actually don't want books to have romance. I just want people to just like live their lives. But yeah, I don't know. So that was a thing. But overall, I was impressed with it. I liked it for a YA thriller. It was okay. It wasn't as good as some of the adult thrillers I've ever read, obviously, but it was pretty good. The second to last book that I read was Luck in the Shadows by Lynn Flewelling. This is a high fantasy book that's kind of hard to explain, but basically it centers around this boy named Alec who meets this guy named Seagal, who is sort of like a spy, and Seagal takes Alec under his wing and is going to like teach him how to be a spy. They end up meeting in some sort of like dungeon situation. I told you this book was hard to explain, so I'm doing a really bad job. But basically, it's just like a fantasy world, and they're spies, and they're going on missions and stuff. There were quite a few things that I really liked about this book. First of all, the kingdom that they're in is led by a matriarchy. They are led by a queen, and they are from a long line of queens. Like, there always has to be a queen in charge. That's like their rule. And it's very LGBT friendly. There's just a lot of openness about that. And it's not been explicitly said in the book so far, but I kind of feel like Seagal and Alec are gonna like totally like have the hots for each other in the next few books, because I think this is like a 7-book series. I heard someone recommend it on BookTube a very long time ago when I first started, and they called it like the Harry Potter of their adulthood, and that definitely intrigued me, so this is why I finally got around to reading it. I also just kind of like anything spy related, and like spies in a fantasy world is super interesting. I only gave this book 3 stars, but it's because it was just really long, and there was just a lot of parts that dragged, but I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that it was the first book of a high fantasy, and they had to do a lot of world building, a lot of explanation. But yeah, there's just like magic in it and spies, and it's a good time. And the last book I read was the first book in the Nevermoor series, The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend. I have always said on this channel that I'm not a fan of middle grade. I don't like how it's written. I'm not a middle grade person, but Nevermoor will do this thing where it'll just like come into your heart and tell you that you're wrong about that, because it is one of the best books I've ever read. But basically it's about this girl named Morgan Crow, and she is what they consider in her world a cursed child because she was born on this one unlucky day of the year. And so whenever things go bad in her town, she gets blamed for them, and her dad's a politician, so it's kind of doesn't reflect well on him. So basically he has to spend a lot of his time like paying his constituents for anything bad that's happened to them. On this certain birthday, cursed children are supposed to die. And so this guy named Jupiter shows up on Morgan's birthday and tells her that he can prevent her from dying if she'll come with him and go through this series of trials in this distant land called Nevermoor. And so she goes with him, and Nevermoor is a very, very like fantastical place. It reminded me a lot of reading Harry Potter, not necessarily because the system, the magic system, or like the fantasy was the same, but just that like she has to train to make it into this program called the Wonder Society. And I don't know, it was just fun. It just reminded me of the feelings I felt when I first read Harry Potter. It was just so cute. I'm rambling again, but again, just remember, guys, it's like 2 a.m. right now. I promise to talk about this book in another video more coherently so that you can be more convinced to read it, but I promise that it was really good. And that's all the books that I read in January and February. It was kind of easier to talk about than I thought because a few of them were series. But yeah, let me know down below if you've been enjoying any books lately, if you think based on what I read, if I'd enjoy anything you're reading. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching. You're all beautiful. Have a nice day.